Hello everybody. Today I'm gonna go over graph of cosine and a couple example. Okay, we are um, going to graph y equal to cosine of theta. In our unit circle, I'm gonna label it again just for the review. This direction is plus. This will be negative. We have 0 here. That means when if this is theta, this theta is started from 0 and gets bigger and gets to 90 degree, gets to 180, to 3 pi half or 270 and 2 pi. So for different theta, we would like to know what is the value of y, or I can write what is value of f of theta. So this y is not this y. It's a function. So when theta is 0, the value of cosine of 0 equal to 1. So f of 0 equal to 1, or y equal to 1. So at 0, we're going to start at 1. So this is a 1 point on the graph. As theta gets larger, the value of cosine, which is this, it gets smaller, and so we know the x value here represents cosine. So at 90 degree, the value of cosine becomes 0. If this is pi half, it will hit 0. So what's happening between 0 to pi half? If you graph all the value of x's from 1, which is getting smaller to 0, it will be a curve like this. No, so this was in quadrant 1, between 0 to pi half. Now after pi half, when for example theta is here, this is our theta, the value of x will be this much. So as theta gets bigger, the value of x gets larger in negative direction, or negative value. Then it will end up being at negative 1. So if I label this pi, and that's negative 1, it will get to, at pi, it will get negative 1. Now in quadrant 3, if theta is there, if this is theta, the value of x is this. If theta gets bigger, this value, this much gets smaller, so gets smaller to 0. So from pi to 3 pi half, again the value of cosine will get to 0. So if I label this one 3 pi half, this value of y gets to 0. At quadrant 4, just if this is our theta in quadrant 4, this much will be value of x. If it gets bigger, the value of x gets larger to 1. So at 2 pi, it gets back to 1. So this will be the period of the cosine, which is 2 pi. So if you do one more revolution, you will continue like this. If you go negative direction, you will start like that. So this is a graph of cosine. And this is a better way to visualize the graph of cosine. So as you guys can see, for different theta, have different value. All right. So now that we have some idea about the graph of sine and cosine, same as sine that we learned that there is an amplitude, sine of like omega x. So we have similar thing for cosine. We have a cosine of omega x. So absolute value of a will be amplitude. Amplitude. And the period of the graph will be 2 pi over omega for both of them. Let's have a couple quizzes now. For example, y equal to 2 plus 3 cosine of 2x. If I ask you guys to graph this, so you have a graphing calculator, you can use it in exam, but I am more interested that you guys know what is the amplitude of this graph and what is the period of this graph. And you also should be able to tell me what are the transformation from cosine of x. If you want to graph this, so you know this is cosine, so this coming from cosine of x. So if you know the graph of cosine of x, well, something like this, then this 3, this 2, and the other 2 you should apply to this graph. But for now, the amplitude as a number that multiply by cosine or sine. In this case is absolute value of 3 is 3. Period of the graph is 2 pi over this coefficient, which is 2. The answer is 2. The answer is pi. So what does it mean? Well, it means that if the cosine of x, the period was 2 pi, this equation or this graph, it will shrink. Everything will be in pi. Amplitude is 3, so this should be 3 and that should be 3. I'm going to start from 3. And you need this plus 2. After you apply the amplitude and the period, you need to shift this graph 2 units up.